Olá, hoje o Brazilian Connection vem direto do Festival da Diaspora aqui no Rio de Janeiro e eu vou conversar com a Lynette Rawlings, uma super mulher que está à frente de um projeto nos Estados Unidos chamado The Academy Policy. O projeto ajuda estudantes de graduação e pós-graduação a alcançar posições de liderança baseado no apoio mútuo de organizações como que a Lynette criou. E a gente vai agora conversar com ela para saber quais os resultados dessa política e como a gente pode também aplicar tudo isso aqui na nossa realidade. Hi, Lynette. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're most welcome, and thank you for having me.
So what did you bring to the Festival of Diaspora here today?
Well, part of my desire to be a part of this incredible community that Cordell and the Festival of Diaspora are building is to really be in, again, community with other Afro-descendant people, to share our work, our creativity, our culture, and to talk across sort of our different sort of trajectories being Afro-descendant, and being a person who specializes in public policy, making sure that we are speaking to the broad area of social policy that affects Afro-descendant people. And I'm really particularly interested in, since racial discrimination and inequality is a big issue around race in the U.S., similarly so in Brazil, and to think about some of those comparisons. What's similar, what's different, what can we learn from each other?
Of course. And why did you create the Academy Policy, and what were the goals you had in mind when you did it?
Sure. So when I was a young researcher in the U.S., I worked at a think tank working on issues of residential segregation in housing and in communities and economic opportunity. But there were basically no Black or brown researchers at the think tank of any senior level where I worked. And it was a very sort of solitary space to try to talk about questions around race. And so when I was senior enough there, about 15 years ago, I decided, well, it's not obvious what the pathway is to do this kind of work. And a lot of young people who are very smart, quite promising, are not mentored and supported in figuring this out, right? And being shown the pathways and getting that early training and early mentorship. So I created a program at that job that worked with a cohort of low to moderate income young people of color to train them in the skills of research, how to ask such questions, how do you go about doing measurement, how do you do analysis before they left college, so they have the skill set so when they will go into their first job, they would have everything they need on their resume to be successful and to thrive in leading institutions. And once you do that, then getting into graduate school and beyond becomes that much more, much simpler. And to make sure to build a support system and an ecosystem around them to help with that support. And also part of my strategy in that was we got young people who were from communities that we were doing research on. They come to it with a different perspective, right? They know what's happening in their institutions and in their communities. And, they should bring their own research questions, and we should train them how to ask the questions that they want to and come up with their own solutions. But to make sure they have the language for and the understanding of the bigger systems so that they're more powerful in their work.
In Brazil, we have some policies similar to what you did, but even though we are 56% of the population, we are Black. Mm-hmm. And among this number, only 29% is made by women. And even though we are not in leadership roles in the academic field or any other field. So how do you see this discrepancy, and how could we do something different in order to change this landscape?
I think that's something we're still struggling with in the U.S. as well. Yeah. I mean, we're not doing great on women's leadership or Black leadership in any way, but I think it's part of that struggle. I mean, one of it's supporting young leaders, right? Supporting the ones who are there, making sure they get the proper resources, the training, make sure we're creating pathways. I think there's, a long history of embedded sort of sexism there as well, right? So I think, again, we really try to make sure that when we do have folks coming through our program, whether they're young women or young men, but particularly the young women, they have opportunities to take on leadership roles, to present at places like this, to develop their own confidence, but also to make sure that they have mentors, they have networks, we have people to vouch for them. We make phone calls, we make sure that they have all the opportunities so no one questions their excellence when they go into those kinds of jobs. But it's a really difficult and challenging thing to combat, to make sure that, you just have to be exceptional, unfortunately, to succeed and excel in these spaces.
Of course. And being exceptional sometimes is quite tiring, right?
Oh, very. It's fatiguing. Yes. So you should be able to be smart enough and thrive, but you end up having to be, again, exceptional to just be in the space. Now, and a lot of people question your being there in the first place.
Yeah. And how many people have you already trained so far on this project?
Well, so we've changed, COVID did change things. So this is part of our sort of relaunch journey. So when I initially started it was at my organization, the initial organization, and I left there and founded the Policy Academies as a separate institution to continue this work. So we were going to do our grand relaunch, but then 2020 happened, and I think we all know, COVID sort of shut down the world. So we changed our model. We did a couple of cohorts then, but we've also now expanded, where we're also, in addition to training younger generations in the specific skill set of think tank research and policy research, expanding to funding some of the work with people who are in graduate programs, because it's not just about people sort of not having the mentoring and training early on coming out of college to get on this pathway. But even then, when you've made it into a PhD program or a master's program, the questions that we have about our own communities, funders don't absolutely support, right? And even if people are well-meaning, sometimes professors who are, or senior researchers who might mentor you, don't understand the dynamics of it and can't fully support you even when they want to. Something I experienced myself. So we've started to, create a pot of funding to make sure that we're helping support young researchers, where if their ideas might be rejected by mainstream funders because they don't understand those things, we will see the promise in it. Look, that's a fantastic topic. We'd love to help you, explore that. So, we can start with seed funding, and then once you get a little bit of funding, other funders tend to come behind and support those kinds of things. So that's one of the ways that we're expanding our work. So both digging in deep early on so people get the skills that they can get into these places and in graduate programs, but then once they're there, so they can persist, because there's a huge deal of what they call push out in PhD programs and graduate programs when it's people of color, when they're not supported in their work.
And what are the biggest challenges you face in this journey?
Myself?
Yourself, and also related to the project itself.
I think the same ones that the people we mentor face, right? Do people believe in women's leadership? Or do they believe in the mission? And if they believe in it, do they believe you can execute it, right? Oftentimes, funders, I think, are much more comfortable with doing work that's considered to be charity, as opposed to investing in leadership where you're meant to be thoughtful, strategic, analytic, creative. I think it's much hard to make that case, which is why when we first started out, it took like 3 years to raise, maybe 4 years to raise sufficient funding to hire staff.
Yeah.
Because we were able to get anything but small donations, and it took a long time to persuade people. Like, here's our track record. Here's what we've done. We've already done the work. We've proven it. I mean, look at some of the people who've come to the programs, and that's really what made the case, because I could go to as many offices as I wanted to, but folks were not willing to write big checks to a Black woman-led institution. So it's been quite an uphill climb, but I know that's what it is for most of us out here doing that work. It's a labor of love. We know we have to keep pushing regardless, because we need people who look like us in all the spaces of power and decision-making, and we can support each other in getting there.
And what is your biggest joy in front of this project? So,
I mean, it's seeing the development and evolution of these amazing young Black and brown minds. I mean, it's incredible. They are just doing exceptional work. Again, the ones when you've known somebody since they were 20 coming into the program and helping them learn how to code, and the other professors, and they're teaching younger people to advance in this field. It's just phenomenal. And one of them is going to be moderating a panel today. She's a professor at University of Texas, Austin, Dr. Chantal Haley. That's amazing. Another one of them, she is the Deputy Chief of Staff at the Department of Ed, reporting to the Secretary. Phenomenal, right? So it's really just been amazing and rewarding. That makes the tough days that so much worth it.
Yeah, so you must be proud of all of this.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I really am.
Okay. So, Lynette, we know that there is a huge and long and very hard process in order to mentor people to achieve this leadership, in a word that you already described it so well for us. But when we get there, what are the biggest challenges when a Black person is there in that place of leadership? Are you there with them as well?
We said when you get there, I was like, what is there?
Yeah, what is there? What is the ceiling, right? The glass ceiling anyway.
I think sometimes it's sustaining it, right? Sustaining funding levels, sustaining your energy level, to keep the work going. There aren't enough of us doing this work. So I think, I think again, resources. And then there's so much need. So even when you have it, how do you then use your time and energy and resources to make the biggest impact? I think, it requires, again, a lot of energy, because for folks who I know who have much bigger profiles, there's so much need. People come to them and ask for, like, how do you discern when and where you put your time and talents? Which is part of why I do get joy in the fact that I'm developing other talented people where they can move those agenda forwards. So it's not just me.
Yeah.
But, I think sustaining it, keeping your own humanity as you do this work, when there's, you might be subject to attacks or criticism, or people are always second guessing your intelligence. And it happens in, a myriad of ways.
Yeah. So equity sounds to be, the biggest share of your job, or your project, and about what you believe. So how does it relate to gender and the future that women can face, why we don't have equity and belonging still as a real and ideal word?
I mean, some of that comes back to the culture of the places where you're raised, right? In the U.S., I can speak to that context. I mean, well, you've had leaders that don't really value women, and that ends up translating into, how people are treated. I think regardless, you push back. So I think we had recent presidents who,
yeah, definitely.
I think have shown with their words and deeds what their positions are on women and where they should be in society. And so I think it's one of those things, like, just like being Black, it's a constant struggle, right? To make sure you're pushing for your rights to be respected in society and to be seen as a full human. And some people just don't. Clearly we've made strides. If you look at it over decades of time, we were in a particularly difficult and ugly period. I think right now, certainly in the U.S. But I think we keep pushing in to turn that around. That's one thing I will say about, that does make one proud about the country, both the struggle for enslaved people to liberate themselves and sort of make progress in society. But there's always backlash in those moments when you are winning.
Yeah.
So I think we are in a moment of backlash against progress for women, for Blacks. But as we've seen in the past, you find ways to overcome it, and it's painful in those periods. But I feel like I would say I'm confident that we will make change, but there's no other choice but to keep pushing back, because, that's who we are.
So while in Brazil, what are the outcomes do you expect to achieve during this festival, and with the experiences you are getting from Brazil now?
I am really looking forward to hearing from the Brazilian experts on the panels to see how, they go about the work, how that compares or aligns with or is different from how the U.S. experience. I think there's a tour of some neighborhoods here. I think one of my parts of my early career, I did research on housing segregation in the U.S. and how it was a matter of both federal and state and local policy to, segregate, Black people in the U.S. into very particular small neighborhoods. I think there are parallels here.
Yeah, totally.
So,
it's not so different than here.
Exactly. But just how was that done differently? How do people justify it or explain it? How was that done differently? And how is the either government or people, or how are they trying to undo what's been decades long, policy of packing people into tight spaces, and also when opportunity does not reach those spaces? So that's sort of what I look at in the U.S. and I can clearly see parallels, but I don't know in depth how that was done here. And I'm really looking forward to digging in and learning. See what lessons I can bring back with me.
And for sure, we have a lot to learn from you and the project you are running. So I saw you running up and down, very busy here during the festival, and you seems to be a woman that never stops. What drives you to do what you do? And how did you get this energy?
Well, I guess some things you're born with, but I'm somebody who's moved by, if I think something's right. If you see a challenge or a problem, you jump in and you fix it, right?
Yeah.
When you find partners and people with it, but also, it's just a matter of, I want everyone who's on the panels who's a part of this to be comfortable. So I will, jump in and see if there's something that can be fixed or done or added to make sure that we have the best possible experience while here. So.
Fantastic. And it seems we are already having this amazing experience.
Absolutely.
Lynette, thank you so much for being here with us. And I hope you enjoy your stay in Brazil. And thank you for bring your experience that I enjoyed so much to learn about.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. And I really look forward to exploring more of this incredibly beautiful city and country.
Esse foi o Brazilian Connection e espero que vocês tenham gostado. Até a próxima!